Admiral Hornblower's adventure continues from where we left off. He has now got himself a new weapon at his disposal to subdue the other lesser naval powers of the world trying to vie for control of the British Empire's oceans. The plane and the aircraft carrier. We now get into a new phase of Rule the Waves 3. Gone are the days of slugging against other battleships from miles away. We now have our little friends to do our bidding. After the last war though, I still have a dilemma on my hands. I have loads of ships in need of refitting, especially battleships and battle cruisers. So finding the time and money to upgrade, but also finding the funding to build and make both aircraft carriers and aircraft capable of fighting a modern navy will be difficult. Firstly, I should explain how you make aircraft and aircraft carriers and how they both work. So you gain access to fighters, float planes and naval patrol aircraft around 1916, but it varies. You have to set up design competitions which take a certain amount of time to conclude. You can change the priorities so that your plane can have more of a certain attribute. However, the stats can't be higher than a certain threshold for the time period, so you can't just keep making fighters till you have a supersonic fighter by 1939. As time progresses, you can start to make torpedo bombers, medium bombers and various types of jet fighters. With that done, you can create squadrons for air bases or carriers. There are also times where private companies give you certain planes that maybe can be amazing or complete gold. Aircraft carrier development starts with research being done so that you can create light aircraft carrier conversions. After that, you can make purpose-built light carriers, followed by aircraft carrier conversion and purpose-built carriers. These can be filled with carrier air wings. Try experimenting with what works best for you. In battle, before we do any moves, we have to set up our cap and search pattern so that the effects happen immediately. To launch a strike, press this button here and then tick which aircraft you want to spot onto the deck. It will take a bit, but when all the aircraft are ready on deck, you can assign the strike targets and which types of vessels to target, like aircraft carriers. When selected and the targets are set, launch the strike and pray you can get the enemy before they get you. With that overview done, we shall head back into Hornblower's campaign. We fast forward to 1922 and we are at war with Russia and America again. My fleet consisted of 11 battleships with 3 of the new Iron Duke class battleships, consisting of 10 x 18-inch guns. We now have 9 battlecruisers, including 5 of the new Incomparable class, with 8 x 16-inch guns and a speed of 31 knots, 10 new armoured cruisers of the Cornwall class, and 26 old light cruisers in need of replacing or refitting. Now for the main event, 2 new light carriers of the Biter class. It can now go 28 knots and has room for 30 aircraft. For the moment, I have a 1-time squadron of 10 fighters and 2-time squadrons of 10 torpedo bombers. With that out of the way, time for war with Russia and America. Not much happened in this war apart from 2 lessons. 1. And 2, aircraft carriers are the way to go. With the war won against the Russians and the Americans, I rearranged the fleet and got the fleet carriers I so desperately wanted. The Argus class was made in 1929 and can carry 60 planes. I managed to make 3 of them before the old enemy duo came back. The Russians declared war on me, and the Americans followed a year later. I managed to keep the Russians checked in Northeast Asia with a string of victories and minor victories and defeats, but that one single decisive victory eluded me, and then I had my chance. The Battle of the Yellow Sea took place. I had 2 battleships, 3 battlecruisers, and 3 light carriers with 30 planes, each for a total of 90 aircraft. The Russians, on the other hand, had 1 battleship, 2 battlecruisers, 1 heavy cruiser, 3 carriers, and 1 light carrier, with a total of 174 carrier aircraft. The battle started with the battleships and battlecruisers engaging each other in battle. Battleships and battlecruisers from each side soon fought each other in separate engagements. The discovery of the battle fleet meant the enemy carriers must be nearby. However, scouting proved to be tricky for me, and not for the enemy. The absolute flood of scouting reports came in, and I didn't look at them fully. This is because they can sometimes be wrong or partially correct. Like, a position is given but no unit info, or it is marked in the wrong place, or given no time of spotting. In hindsight, I should have looked at the reports more closely. Then at least I can attack the enemy carriers, and then come back for the battleships later. but alas, I did not do this. I made the mistake and aimed for the big battleships, even though my forces were clearly going to win. My light carrier forces got attacked and HMS Biter was severely damaged by torpedo hits. I count my lucky stars that she didn't go down. At the end of the battle, I sank the enemy battleship and battlecruiser forces, but couldn't find the aircraft carriers. The after-action report would show the Russian carrier fleet in a corner of the map, pushed by the wind. This would become a recurring theme for the Russians. After this battle, the Americans turned up to obligate their treaty with the Soviets, and that's when I realised I was in trouble.
I'm in danger!
America had 8 to 10 full aircraft carriers in the Caribbean. I only had 3 carriers, with my 3 light carriers still needed in Northeast Asia. So I made some more carriers of the Ark Royal class and started to figure out my war strategy. The committee of the Unified Naval Team was convened. They wanted a decisive victory against the Americans and proposed we let them try to invade a territory. This was a good idea as the heavy gun fleet will have to stay near the convoy heading for the invasion beach, giving us time to move around. However, this was a good plan 30 years ago. The advent of carriers and aircraft means that we will now be harassed at every opportunity. I was worried thinking, how do I retain my empire, or at least get a status quo antebellum, or at least a return to what we were before the war.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. Set material conditions even throughout the ship. Make Z report to DC Central.
Lots of action around the Caribbean in this time, as well as the Russian fleet holding us in Northeast Asia. First major engagement with the United States Navy was the Battle of Lilly Point. I met them with 2 battleships, 2 battlecruisers, 3 heavy cruisers and 4 carriers. We had 270 carrier aircraft for the battle, whilst the Americans bought 1 battleship, 8 battlecruisers, 8 carriers, 3 light carriers, and they managed to muster 607 carrier aircraft. The odds were stacked against me, but the committee of the Unified Naval Team believed in the battle line, defeating any enemy it can come up against. I really shouldn't have believed them.
Out of action, nearly all killed. Red Kit picked off the armor. You need to throw most of it.
Spread, flood the magazine.
Right, sir.
X-turret out of action, sir. Y turret jammed.
But then the enemy battle line came into view. A slugging match ensued and we lost a battleship whilst only damaging their capital ships. At the same time, I got a contact report of carriers out to the northeast and decided to send them out. I knew this was a massive gamble, but I had one choice and no other options. The resulting attack nearly destroyed one of their carriers, but then they retaliated with all their might.
Raven leader, Raven 1, Raven 2, you missed out. Raven 1 to Raven leader. Commander McCluskey, they got bombs stacked all over their flight deck. Bullseye! Bullseye!
Scratch 1 flat top. Sweet mother, we caught him cold.
We suffered a crippling defeat. With the battle over, I realised that this was a decisive victory for the Americans, and that I will have to let go of the Caribbean to save the rest of my navy. I needed to sue for peace soon. I kept my forces in Northeast Asia as to try and whittle down the weaker enemy, which was still a tall order. But luckily, in one battle, I managed to sink 2 Russian carriers in a gun duel with my light cruiser after they were backed into a corner. This freed up a lot of resources, but it was too late to change the outcome of the war. It was inevitably nearing its conclusion. Sunk convoys led to fuel shortages and a severe unrest in the country. The trade protection was woefully mismanaged and led to more tonnage going to the bottom. Before I knew it, home was changing fast. A new party came into power who promised peace. The old government tried to order their arrest, but the people had enough. The Navy leaders were pardoned after they had seen the writing on the wall and begged to stop fighting and save their men. The old admirals of the Committee of the Unified Naval Team were retired and replaced. The treaty that we got was awful. We lost the territories of Egypt, Cyprus and the Lautang Peninsula to the Russians. We had to hand over HMS Eagle, our only carrier left, to the Russians, as well as a heavy cruiser, and gave the USA 1 light cruiser and 1 heavy cruiser as compensation. We had to scrap all of our subs and we weren't allowed to build any subs, carriers and battleship. And the coup de grace, nothing can be built that is over 10 tons for 8 years. This is a massive humiliation for the British. To be honest, I can't stand that. Russia and America has made an enemy for life, but how on earth can I catch up to them?